Hey guys, Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. Welcome back to the channel. Well, it's time for a swan dive into ladder testing. I've been really wrestling with what to do with this because ladder testing alone I could probably do a whole video series on, but I'm having to figure out how to, I've never taught this stuff formally, so I'm trying to figure out how to cluster things and in what order to explain them so that they're the most digestible, and it's really been a struggle. I've been battling with this portion of the series more than anything else, just trying to figure out how to put this in a digestible format and make it understandable and not just talk in circles for hours on end. So we'll get into that here. The first couple housekeeping things. Today is May 22nd, Thursday. I think we just broke 13,000 subscribers yesterday, so I want to say thank you guys for that. Participation in the series is still overwhelming. Lots of comments, lots of guys looking forward to the release every Friday and getting really good feedback on this. I will say that I'm doing the best I can to answer as many questions as I can throughout the series. We have been getting a lot of calls and emails asking particular reloading questions, like asking me to give you feedback directly on what your load is and what's going on with your situation. I appreciate the enthusiasm, and we're glad that you're following this along and finding it useful, but I don't have time to answer all these questions individually. So you guys do the best you can to put your questions in the comments, and I'll try to address them as best I can, but I'm not going to be able to answer you directly if you're calling the shop or emailing in. I don't have time. I'm sorry, but I just don't. So do the best you can to try to put your questions in the comments so that I see them, because I do see every comment. I read every one, whether I answer it or not. So, and then the other thing I want to let you guys know is that we do have the Athlon chronographs in stock now. They're available for purchase on the website, so I'll put a link to that product page down in the description of this video, so that any of you guys that have been holding out waiting for us to have them in stock and are still looking to get one, we do have them now. The sale price on them is a little bit higher than I thought it was going to be. I thought it'd be around $350, but they're right at that $400 mark, and that's not up to us. That's determined by Athlon, so we have to sell it at whatever price they dictate. So we're going to be priced the same as everybody else, at least everybody that's playing by the rules. So now that that's out of the way, I guess we should talk a little bit about the last video, and I'm guessing that blew a lot of people's hair back. Again, I guess I don't want to say I apologize, but that video was a little bit rowdy just because it's very different from what you're hearing on other videos from other channels and anything you might have heard anywhere else. And I knew it was going to make a big splash, and because I wasn't feeling that well, I got a little more Western than usual, for better or worse. But I think we need to take a few minutes and kind of recap on that. So I'll fire up my screen recording here and we'll get going. 3, 2, 1, and we're live. Okay, I got our Dunning-Kruger back up here. Mainly because that last video, and now especially this one and probably the one following this one, I'm guessing a lot of you, if you haven't already, these next couple videos are going to be a gigantic swan dive off of Mount Stupid into the Valley of Despair, and then hopefully I can start pushing you back up the other side. I don't know how else to verbally prepare you guys for this. This is going to be a lot, so put your helmet on, and I'll do the best I can to explain this stuff thoroughly. But if you have questions, again, put them down in the comments. All right, so this is an example. This is not something that was shot in the test, but this is the example that I used in the last video where I talked about my 10 to 15 shot test and what you're going to see at the end of that. So if you haven't seen that video, I'm going to probably link it up in the corner here. I recommend you go back and watch that just to make sure that you have a grasp of what we're doing here. But basically we want to test the whole pressure range for your cartridge and bullet combination and the powder you picked from 50,000 psi to whatever you determine is your max. And then we want to test one shot per increment in very small increments. Take whatever your max charge is, multiply times 0.0045, and then again times 0.006. You'll get a range. You want your increment to be somewhere in there. In our case, for a 308, it was 0.2 grain increments. Magnum cartridges is going to be 0.3 to 0.4. And then small cartridges like a 223, you're going to be testing every 10th, or at least you should. So why is this relevant? Well, I talked about it a little bit in the last video. We're basically using this test as a way to explore different powders so you don't get overcommitted to one powder in general. And why does that matter? Well, we see here that when you shoot an aggregate across your whole pressure range for these different powders, they form different size groups. And it's not, the sample size police would say, okay, what can you possibly learn from one shot of each charge weight? It's not statistically significant. Well, that may be true, but what this is doing is it's basically a little bit of a scatter plot to show us, like, okay, no matter how much powder is in there, which powder looks like it's going to behave or shoot the best, or shoot in the same general area and not be erratic and spray things all over. And what you'll find is that if you took the time to do extensive ladder tests with each of these, they're going to show up differently on target, and I'll show you that by example. So these first two, A and B, these are actually pretty respectable, where these aggregates are, let's say, 2 inches from here to here, right? They're not very big, but let's say they were. Let's say they were 3 or 4 inches, which for my 10 to 15 shot test, if your aggregate group for the 10 to 15 shots is 3 to 4 inches, that's probably not something you want to waste any time on. That's what I would call very big. And if it's bigger than 3 to 4 inches, forget about it. That's a very big aggregate. I would say an average aggregate for 10 to 15 shots is around that 2-inch mark, maybe a little under. If you start getting down around an inch or under an inch, that's very good, and that's likely a powder you want to spend more time exploring. Now, this is just a generality. It depends on if you're talking a hunting rifle, a competition rifle, whatever. Competition rifles, match rifles, heavy target rifles, I would say that your aggregate... Oh, clouds came over now, and all of a sudden the camera's really dark. Change my exposure here. If it's a target rifle, competition rifle, I would say your 10 to 15 shot aggregate should be down around that 1-inch mark. Where if it's a hunting rifle, maybe between 1 and 2 inches. Not really any bigger than that. If it's bigger than 2, it's going to give you problems, and I'll show you why. So these two examples, let's say these two aggregates were in that 3-inch neighborhood, where they're getting on the big side. Well, what that's going to look like if you shoot a more extensive ladder test. So remember I said after you shoot this and you pick a winner, then you load up 3 shots of each charge weight, and then you shoot them at their own individual point of aim. Well, if you did that with a powder like this that is shooting an aggregate around, say, 2, 3, 4 inches, let's say 3 to 4 or bigger, this is what it's going to look like when you do that test. So see, each of these points of aim have a different charge weight being shot at them. And this is what I would call a pretty average ladder test. So this might be what it looks like if you have, say, a 2-inch aggregate on that 10 to 15 shot test, where you have a couple outliers here that look like they might group quasi-decent, and then the rest is kind of mishmash. You don't really know what you're getting. And then what I was going to say about this one that shoots smaller, the biggest driving force as to whether or not that can possibly occur outside of the gun and your skill and all that is the combination of, going back to our Pareto chart, the combination of cartridge, powder, and bullet. Those 3 things are the biggest driving factor on whether or not this is going to occur. So, and all the other stuff on here matters to varying degrees, as we've discussed. But the first 3, cartridge, powder, and bullet, are the biggest driving factor on whether or not this can occur. And all these tests were all shot with the same cartridge and the same bullet. The only difference was the powder. And you see how drastic of an effect that can have. There are some guys that say that, you know, the best way to find a combination that shoots small like this is to change the bullet. I think that's a completely amateur move. I think powder is the way to do it. So when you get a test like this, you go, okay, well, you know, and a lot of you guys, I'm sure this is how all your ladder tests look. You're like, okay, well, 65.6 grains is my load. And this is where I'm going to start to explain now why those of you that commit to something like that, where this is the best group on the whole sheet, it's probably like a 1/2 inch or something like that, maybe a little bigger. And you go, all right, this is my load. Well, I think this is why a lot of you guys are having trouble finding a stable load. I'm gonna have to shut these blinds or something. My exposure keeps changing and it looks weird. I'm gonna shut them quick. I don't want to keep messing with the camera. Partly cloudy day, and amount of light coming in the window keeps changing, washing me out and screwing up my video. Okay, so those of you that commit to a load like this and go, okay, shot great, it'll shoot, you know, 1/2 inch groups, this is my load, super happy about it. Well, first thing we need to look at is average point of impact location. I mentioned this in the last video. Average point of impact location is more important than the group size. And as we go through these next couple videos, I'll explain that thoroughly. Again, it's really hard to get, I don't want to get mired down in any one thing too fast, because then that's all we'll talk about in that one in the video. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this. If we look at each of these charge weights, this one only has 2 shots. I'm guessing because of the amount of brass I had, I was limited. I couldn't do 3 with all of them. So our average point of impact location for the lowest charge is right here. And the next charge, so that's what? Almost 9 o'clock. Next charge, it's all the way over at 2 o'clock. And keep in mind, I did not change anything on the scope during this test. That's one thing I should tell you guys is during this 10-shot test, 10 to 15 shot test, don't change your scope at all. And then same thing when you go to shoot a regular ladder test, don't change your scope at all. Because if you start shooting your ladder test, you shoot, let's say, the first group, second group, third group, and it starts migrating away from the dot, and then you change it, the things I'm going to teach you, you're not going to be able to find. So if you change your scope in the middle of the ladder test, you might as well throw the whole thing away and start over. So without changing the scope, this is where the average point of impacts moved on their own just due to the harmonics and whatever, the particulars of the load. So this one's at about 2 o'clock. And I didn't spend a ton of time picking these averages. I just kind of ballpark eyeballed it. So keep that in mind. Don't nitpick the exact location of the average point of impact. Just look at generally how it migrates. So that was about 2 o'clock. Here we're at 1 o'clock. Here we're at noon. Here we're back at about 1, but it's much farther away from the dot. Here we're still at 1, but it's even farther away from the dot. Now here we're at 1, but it's back closer to the dot. Now here we're at 1:30, and it's really far away from the dot. And then when you get to the top, it goes over to 10 o'clock, and it's pretty far away from the dot. Not very good. I would call this a fairly unhappy combination. Because what we want is, we want the average point of impact location, these red dots, to have very little to no movement. If you want to have a stable load across time, you want that average point of impact to move as little as possible, regardless of how much is in powder is in the case. And this is an example of, like what I said, where if your ag shoots big for 10 to 15 shots, and then you decide to explore it further, this is what you're going to see. Now, the particulars of, let's say, this charge weight here, how it shot about a 1/2 inch group, that's pretty good. I can't tell you based on that 10 to 15 shot test what the best group you're going to be able to pull out of that powder is. But what I can tell you is the average point of impact location in general is going to be like this. where it's going to be jumping all over the place. This is what I would call pretty average for hunting rifles, not competition rifles or match rifles. This would be very poor, but for hunting rifles, this is pretty average. And as we go through here, I'll explain why, the average point of impact location being the same is very important, especially for anybody that shoots long range. Oh, what do we have here? So this is another reason that loads seem to derail on you guys, is that you need to fundamentally change the way you think about this. Each of these different charge weights you have to think of as there's basically no difference between charge weight, temperature, and pressure. Those are basically interchangeable. And that's the way you need to look at it. So those of you guys that decide to pick this 65.6 grains because it shot a half inch, well, that's how it shot under the conditions of that day, and the conditions of your barrel, and the conditions, all the particular conditions of that day that generated whatever that pressure is and velocity, cause it to shoot that way. If any of the conditions change to push you away from that pressure and velocity significantly enough, it's going to behave like something else. It's going to act like a different charge weight. And when you go in Gordon's and you figure this out, you go, okay, if I test it at 30 degrees and this is how this shot, well, you can go in Gordon's and you can go, okay, you can true your velocity and go, all right, this charge weight produced this velocity at this temperature. Now, what's going to happen? One charge weight higher was, let's say, 20 feet a second faster. One charge weight slower was 20 feet a second slower. You can go in Gordon's and play with the temperature under the powder. I'll show you guys that. So you can go in here and go, okay, I'm going to change this temperature to whatever, 48. You see it changes our velocity from 2623 to 2630. So you can play with that temperature up and down and figure out this. And basically you're figuring out that, all right, at 30 degrees, this is how it shot. So if I just load up a ton of those and forget about it and say, okay, this is my load no matter what, and then I take it out and shoot it when it's much warmer at 72 degrees, even though you didn't change the charge weight, this charge weight, 65.6, is going to shoot like this. It's going to shoot like a higher charge weight just because the temperature changed. So now look at how much our average point of impact location changed. Probably almost an inch from where, average point of impact. So it's going from like here to here. So it moved an MOA away to the 130, and the group size almost doubled. Same thing going the other way. If you develop the load at 30 degrees and you take it out when it's 10 below, our average point of impact location went to kind of 1230. So from 1 to kind of 1230, and it moved farther away, and the group size tripled. And this is why why your load is disappearing on you, is because you're picking something, most of you, like I said in the powder videos, like you're picking a powder and then you're just trying different bullets in the hopes that you're going to find something that's happy. Well, you test a bullet and you go right to an extensive ladder test like this, where you load up 3 shots of your given charge weight in whatever increments you decided to pick, probably too big, and you see one that shoots well, but on both sides of it, it shoots like shit, and you're not paying any attention to that. You're like, okay, well, this one shoots good. I'm not going to worry about what's adjacent to it. You guys got to get that completely out of your head. You need to be worried about what's adjacent to it. If you want a stable load across time, you need to worry about not only what's immediately adjacent to it, but what if across all the charge weights where the average point of impact location is, and how that's migrating, what the average group size is all the way across the test. And as we go on here, I'll explain that more thoroughly. And then here's another example. This is what I would call a very unhappy gun. And you go, wait a minute. it shot a 1/2 inch group here and a 1/2 inch group here, and 2 together, 1 out, 2 together, 1 out, 2 together, 1 out, 2 together, 1 out. You see the trend? 2 together, 1 out, 2 together, 1 out. This is a very unhappy gun. And look at our average point of impact location. And again, I did not change the scope. I just shot the test. And the other thing I should say, because of the way I do everything, I shoot this round robin. So I shot 1 shot of this charge weight, then I shot 1 shot of this charge weight. 1, 1, 1, 1, all the way up. And then I shot the second one, second, and so on. Then I do that back and forth. So I'm spreading all the conditions, like I said in the last video, I'm spreading all the conditions of the test across the test so that nothing's getting treated more favorably than anything else. And despite that, we got 1/2 inch group here, 1/2 inch group here. Those average point of impacts locations are not terrible. They're probably 3/4 of an inch or so apart. And then this next one goes up to about 10 o'clock and starts doing the 2 together, 1 out stuff. And so we see probably our best average point of impact location across the test is probably here and up here, regardless of the group size. And I'll explain that more thoroughly in the next video. We'll dive into the minutia. I'm just trying to show you guys, like, based on that 10 to 15 shot test, if you threw more data at it and tested more shots of each charge weight, what you're going to see and why it's important for you to pick the powder that shot the smallest aggregate. But we see our average point of impact location here going from 9, 10, 10 and far away, 10 and close, 5 and a ways away, back to 1 o'clock, still 1 o'clock, still 1 o'clock. But you see how our group sizes and shapes and average group size, very random here. So same deal. You pick this one and you're like, okay, I want it. I don't want this one because it's too slow. You know, this one that maybe might have been consistent, or at least quasi-consistent, more consistent than up here. You go, well, I don't want these because they're too slow. The internet told me I'm supposed to be getting another 100 feet a second out of this bullet. So these aren't going to cut it, you know, or these first two aren't going to cut it because these are 130 feet a second under where I want to be, even though these two are going to shoot the best of anything on this board. If you picked a load between these two, you know, split the difference. If these are 4/10 apart, if you went 2/10 higher than this one, 2/10 lower than that one, and that was your load, this is going to shoot better than anything else on the board because of the average group size and the average point of impact location. But you convince yourself that that's not good enough because it's too slow. So then you come up here and you pick this one. You're like, well, you know, it's still sub MOA, put 2 together, you know, maybe I can make that shoot. Well, look at what's on either side of it. 1.5 inch plus groups. So same deal. As temperature changes, that's what this thing's going to do. Now, this is a little bit better than the last one in that the average point of impact location is very similar, but the group size is just quite a bit different. So this still might shoot okay, but it's probably not going to shoot as well as what's down here on average across time, across temperatures, and on and on. But guys get too wrapped up in, you know, chasing velocity, so they're going to go, okay, well, I want the fastest thing that shoots good. And in reality, you're probably setting yourself up for trouble. So those were 2 examples of something that maybe shoots a bigger aggregate. If it shoots big in that 10 to 15 shot test, this is what you're going to see if you just throw more shots at it. Now this one, powder C, where this shot the best far and away. If you just throw more shots at this test and you load up 3 at charge weight 1, 3 at charge weight 2, 3, 4, and so on, load up 3 shots of each one and shoot them at their own point of impact, what are you going to see? Something more like this. So this is our ladder test from this series, from our 308. And I know this is a little bit out of order, kind of putting the cart before the horse, but it was a prime example for me to show you why this test is important and why it's important to pick the one with the smallest aggregate. So what do we see here? Shot a hell of a lot better than the other two examples, right? In every way. And again, I shot this whole test without touching the scope because you need to do that in order to get good data on what the average point of impact location is doing without you touching the gun, without you changing the scope. You need to know, like, as your velocity increases, what does this thing do? There's our average point of impact locations. So down here on the bottom end where the charge weight's very low, remember from our example in the powder videos, these bottom two charge weights probably don't have 100% burnt propellant. They're in that 99 neighborhood. And surprise, surprise, they were the most erratic. Who's shocked? Not me. Look at where the averages are. 930, 930, very similar to each other, but almost all vertical, which I don't like to see. And I'll explain, I'll beat that to death as we go on here. Now we're at about almost a solid 10, I would say, and pretty close to the circle. And look at how consistent that stays. I think you guys have been taught to just look at group size, and we'll go into why that's not all that important. So get your mind out of that. Get away from, we need to worry about what shot the smallest group and start thinking about, okay, what was the average point of impact? Like, where is this thing telling me it wants to shoot? Here we go. 10 o'clock, say a 1/4 inch away from the circle. Same, 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 almost the same. So even though the groups are different, that doesn't mean shit. Look at where the average point of impact location is. That's going to shoot. It really doesn't matter what charge weight you pick in there. That's going to shoot. You got your average point of impact location. You go 1 click right, 1 click down, and you're zeroed for that average point of impact location. It really doesn't matter what charge weight you pick in here. It's going to shoot circles around anything these can produce. Even though these were way higher performance cartridges, and this is our dumpy 308, on average across time, this is going to shoot circles around that other stuff. And it really doesn't matter what charge weight you pick. Same thing up here. We'll go up to the top row. Same thing, 10 o'clock, maybe 3/8 of an inch away from the circle. 10 o'clock, 10:30, 1/4 inch. A lot more like 11 o'clock, 11 o'clock, noon, 12:30, 11, 11:30, 12:30. Let's see, we got another consistent streak here where there's a little bit of point of impact shift, but again, grouping really well in general. This one that's a little wider, I won't worry too much about that. I'll go into why later. But you see, very happy area of charge weight. And again, these are in 0.2 of a grain increments. If we say, okay, we tested this at 50 degrees, same thing. If we test it at 50 degrees, we have 2 different areas or 2 different charges that we could pick. So let's say we picked this charge weight and we tested it at 50 degrees. At 20 degrees, this is how it's going to shoot, approximately. At 8 below, starts to open up a little bit, but our average point of impact is still very similar. Up to 78 degrees, same thing. Still shoots really well. Average point of impact shifting slightly, but not very much. 98 degrees, same thing. So we have a really stable area here. Then this lower charge weight. Let's say we picked this charge weight and it shot like this at 50 degrees. at 76 degrees, it's going to shoot in the same place. It might not necessarily all pound them in the same hole like that. It might look like this, it might look like this, it might look like this, it might look like this. But on average, it's still going to hit in the same place. And this is most important. This is why the point of impact location is most important for long range guys and hunters, is because you're setting your zero based on this, right? So if this is where it hit at 50 degrees, and then usually it's the reverse. Most of the time guys are doing load development during the summer because that's when they have time, and all the hunting seasons are in the fall. So let's say you get this one whole group and it's 76 degrees and you set that as your load. Well, and then you go hunting in the fall and it's 50 degrees or 20 degrees. You want to make sure that it's still going to hit in the same average place because you zeroed based on this. So you went one click right, one click down and set your zero. And now, you're out hunting and you got a shot at 300-400 yards or whatever the number is. You want to know that the bullets are headed for the same place. And you didn't have what we see back here, like say from this one to this one, you don't have a giant point of impact location change that's gonna, not only are your shots gonna disperse at distance and you're gonna have a, say a bigger size potential group, but if it's shifted, that group's gonna be somewhere else. It's not gonna be where you're aiming. So I think this is where so many guys go off the rails, is that you're not picking something that is like this, that has consistent average point of impact location across charge weights. Because again, there really isn't much difference between temperature and pressure and charge weight. Now, the same thing can occur if you have like tremendous fouling in the barrel. So let's say you picked this charge weight, it's shot like this at 20 degrees, that's your charge weight. Well, then you just keep shooting it and you accrue more and more and more and more fouling in the barrel. Well, eventually it's going to shoot like this one because of added pressure, even if the temperature is the same. This is where a lot of guys that shoot prairie dogs like myself get into trouble, is they develop a load. Let's say they even develop it at the temperature they're going to use it at. And you go out and shoot prairie dogs and you put 300, 400, 500 rounds on a barrel in one day. Well, you'll notice it'll start out shooting lights out. Well, eventually you get later in the day, and I know this has happened to some of you guys, all of a sudden you either start blowing primers or the consistency goes to hell, the groups get huge, it's not shooting well anymore. Well, you picked a load that had a big load above it, you picked a load that had, say, a big group above it and was, maybe you're on the ragged edge of pressure, and if you go one charge weight higher, it blows apart and it's over pressure. Well, you artificially moved yourself into that just due to fouling, even if the temperature hasn't changed, because fouling increases pressure. So whether it's from fouling or temperature or charge weight or whatever, this is how you guys need to be looking at this. It's all fluid. Everything affects everything else. And you can't just say, well, I loaded the same charge weight, it should shoot the same. It's not that simple. I wish it was, but it's not. This is how it works. So you guys, this is how you guys need to start thinking, is don't get fixated on that teeny little group that had big groups on either side of it. You are setting yourself up for failure. That load will never be stable across time. It just won't. I don't know what else to tell you. So, if you want to try to find something like this, the best way to locate it is with this 10 to 15 shot test. This is the smallest amount you're going to be able to invest to try to find something that shoots a small egg and then therefore is likely to produce something like this. So, back to our Dunning-Kruger. How bad was the swan dive? So I think that's it for this one. I'm trying to keep these in digestible sizes just because there's a lot to it, and I literally could talk for a whole day on ladder tests alone. But I just wanted to get you guys in the right frame of mind and thinking about like what actually matters and how you're going to be able to find a combination that's going to put you on the path to potentially have success. You know, picking something that shoots a 10 to 15 shot egg that's in the 2, 3, 4 inch neighborhood, you're wasting your time. You're never going to get to where you want to be. That's why you need to be willing to try different powders and do this 10 to 15 shot test with each powder. And that's enough for you to be able to find something that is going to give you the best opportunity to find a stable load across time. So I think that's it for this one. Next, we're going to go into our actual ladder test, like me actually shooting it. I'm going to show you the conditions in which I shot it at the range, and then we're going to do more of a deep dive on the minutia. So we'll spend more time looking at these test results and go into the actual group sizes and the velocity, extreme spreads, the vertical, and spend a little more time talking about average point of impact location and group sizes in general and how that works. And that's going to blow a lot of people's hair back that don't really know how this works. So I think that's it. Like, subscribe, share with your buddies, all that good stuff. We'll see you on the next one.